Three, two. Hi, my name's Lliam Holmes. I'm the CEO of MIS Solutions. And today we're going to continue our series. We're talking about cyber insurance. And specifically, for those of you who joined us in our last uh, uh, podcast, it was really about, you know, insurance, cyber insurance. What is it? What are the different kinds of policies? What are the different kinds of things to look out for? And we want to advance that conversation today and really talking about the role of AI with insurance companies and how are they using it and sort of how do they see it from their perspective. And so um, I really want to kind of go all the way back to 2023 for those of us who joined us with our tech exchange. And we talked about, AI as far back then. And it was really this new emerging technology. OpenAI had really kind of just come out with some of their models. And one of the things that we talked about as a takeaway in that tech exchange was about trying to find something in your business that you could make better and you could use as a guinea pig, if you will, to create something that would be automated using AI, right? And we know that all of us have things in our businesses that um, we wish we could make better or faster or you know maybe have more insight. And so AI is really a tool that's really helping us do that. And so as we kind of go into this next topic today, I have Steve Harmon here with us, and he is with Snellings Walters, who is a local insurance company. Steve is a principal and one of their risk managers, and I thought he would be a fantastic resource for us to really, start talking about AI and how that's affecting, the brokers as well as the carriers. And so, welcome, Steve.
Thank you for having me. We've appreciated our partnership with MIS and are excited about this topic because we see it being very important as we grow our firm.
Awesome. Okay, so let's kind of just jump right into it, right? And so, I know that you and I have had a couple of conversations, and one of the things that I think we're seeing is that we're kind of looking a little bit into the future, right? Where we're
Mhm.
saying, hey, AI is not really yet in that insurance broker space. We're seeing it upstream a little bit with some of the carriers. We're anticipating that, in 2025, maybe a bleed over into 2026 that AI is really going to make its space not only into the insurance industry, but in many of our industries. You often hear companies talk about the year of the agent, right? The AI agent, these sort of AI assistants, if you will. And so we can sort of look just a little bit into the future and really start to see that coming. And so I'd love to hear from you.
Sure.
How do you think insurance is playing into that? Where do you think that they're really going to embrace that?
Well, if you think about our insurance industry, the independent insurance agency system, a lot of carriers use us as their sales force. So we're going out, meeting with risks, getting data, sending it to the carrier. However, we're also reliable on our carriers with the data they have, the approaching storm, areas that have better fire prevention and coding and zoning because you get better insurance rates in those areas.
Right.
So it's a two-way street, but um, there are carriers out there that are better at this than other carriers, and that becomes important because we're always trying to find an edge. And that's why we use MIS, by the way, because they've been very helpful in that. But in the data accumulation as well as claims, we're seeing carriers have more advanced AI in both their assessment of storm, let's say storms, for example, or claims.
Mm.
And then we're also seeing a need on our side because we're trying to find efficiency with getting that data and getting it to the carrier so that we in turn can show quotes, hopefully improved quotes to our clients.
Right. I think it's really interesting when you think about, an insurance carrier, right? Somebody like the Hartford, right? When these guys have tremendous amounts of data, right? And then you kind of think about this from um, a company perspective, right? And the rule of thumb is when it comes to risk, you do everything you can to treat the risk, to mitigate that risk, right? Whether that's people or process technology, whatever it is.
Mhm.
But whatever that residual risk is, that risk that you can't treat, you buy insurance for that, right? And cyber insurance is certainly one of those things.
Yes.
We all know that there's not one technology, one thing, one process that you could put in place that would 100% make you safe. And so you're buying insurance, right? And then you kind of go back to that thought about these insurance carriers that have all this data and they're trying to quantify the amount of risk that you have. And I know that they have whole teams of people, and this is all they do is look at this data and try to understand how much risk does this company represent, right? And this is that sort of that underwriting process. And it seems that from a insurance carrier perspective, this is an opportune place where they would use AI automation to try to understand that data analytics. Do you have any insight from a broker in terms of how these guys are using it in that way?
Yeah. So it's a good question. Maybe if you're a business owner, you probably already know this, but if you buy cyber insurance or found yourself exploring it, you'll soon find that carriers are going to require you to have certain standards or procedures for login, third party authorization, and so they're going to actually be in the middle of helping you manage your business, like it or not. That's what's happening. But the reason for that is because they have data on where the claims are coming from. That's AI. They know who to insure and who they can't. So what we're seeing now that I think is something to observe and note in the future is carriers are going to be on the side of saying this is what we want to insure and this is what we don't want to insure. And to get the better rates, you're going to need to do A, B, and C. And that's coming from data. And so it's frustrating to us who are trying to do our job and all of a sudden have to stop and put in technology that we didn't know we needed, but only so that we can prevent claims that we haven't had. That's what's also difficult. So, but I will say, operating a business now and not having those types of coverages, I mean, that could cripple or end your business. So we're on the side of trying to, just like you, we have to buy it as well. And we're trying to advise, and we're not trying to sell things people don't need. We're trying to sell things that prevent and allow business to continue to operate is a better word, allow them to continue to operate. So that's a great example of how AI and claims data is actually helping businesses and also dictating what is a better insured.
Yeah. And I would guess that, the amount of data that they have really gives them a tremendous insight where they know, you know, these industries, this geography, these cities, this zip code, they know where those risks are coming from, and then can back their way into what kinds of companies have more risk versus less risk, right? I know that one of the things that we've seen, interestingly, in the IT industry is because of, all of this risk that we have in terms of our people helping our clients with passwords or resetting passwords or access to systems, it has made the IT companies themselves a much bigger target than maybe they were, 7, 8, 10 years ago, right? And so you look at all that data, we know that our insurance tends to have become more expensive, right? Kind of like a doctor, right? A doctor, their insurance, their malpractice insurance is actually really expensive. And the reason for that is because they know that's where the risk comes from. And so, as these insurance companies are looking at, this data and they're able to really use AI to pinpoint that risk, they are becoming a lot more um, adept in that underwriting process and really understanding how much risk do you have. And I agree with you. I think that that is translating then into these insurance companies coming to you and saying, we know that you are in a high risk kind of a business. And because of that, um, we may have some general or generic things that we want you to do, but there might be some other things that end up being targeted at you specifically because of the business that you're in, right? And it's all about trying to manage that risk.
Yeah, that's a good segue to kind of a philosophy that we like to use at our agency, which is a lot of people buy insurance where they're not sure if they can afford it. We don't like that philosophy. We think you have to manage it first and insure it last. Because if you're not managing your drivers, you don't know who's driving your vehicles. Your chance for loss goes up, not down. And so, what I love about AI is it allows you to better manage your business so that you are on the side of a better risk for a carrier. And if you're in a high risk business, then you've got to figure out a way to separate yourself because it is a game of trying to find better rates and having that data, not waiting for a carrier to tell you what to do like they do with third party authentications, but showing a carrier that you're separating yourself because you're managing your risk and you're aware of your business and you're managing your threats. It makes you more attractive to the marketplace. And that's really most of what we're doing. We're trying to convince a carrier that you are a better or best in business compared
Mm,
to your competitors.
yeah. So it's a really interesting thing, right? Because as a broker, you kind of sit between the customer, the business owner, and these carriers that are trying to quantify how much risk you pose. And you are trying to present that customer to that carrier in the best light
That's
possible.
right.
And they're using all of these analytics and technology to be able to take what you're saying, that census that they give you, and really look at their entire database and saying, hey, we think that this guy represents this amount of risk, right? And
That's right.
and I imagine that sometimes you guys are having to go to these carriers on your customers' behalf and saying, you know, here's what it says, but here's what you need to know to really fully understand that company. Because AI, as good as it is, one of the things I've always said is that artificial intelligence is very good about structural awareness, things that you can quantify, rules based kinds of things, but it's not as good with situational awareness, right? Where you're
Mhm.
saying, hey, this company this time because I know this guy and I know their history of what happened. He may look like another manufacturing company or CPA company, but let me tell you why he's different. And I think that, your insurance carrier uh, really is able to put that story together and to present that back to the carrier.
Yes.
Is that fair?
That's fair. That's a good point. Oftentimes, if we go after an industry or if I'm calling on a particular company that's in a particular industry, I'm going to rely on a carrier that has a niche in that and already kind of knows the type of guys you want to write and the ones you don't. Because some of the challenges to insurance agents, your insurance agent, is he is trying his best to establish a book and grow a book that he can serve and manage. But at the same time, he's trying to make sure that he's not having to have a guy change his whole business around just so he can get insurance. And we're at a time right now in Georgia where rates are such and coverages are such where it's challenging. So you're trying to make not only a guy presentable, but you're trying to help a guy manage his business, which is more and more difficult, requires
Mhm.
more people. And so you're a good segue to why AI would be helpful to us is because it does create efficiency that allows you to better manage your business so you are more presentable risk.
Yeah. And so if you kind of think about, what's happening upstream with these carriers and how they are starting to embrace AI, and then you kind of look at an insurance broker and you kind of broaden that field a little bit and say, hey, our job is to really take care of our customers, right? And so, when something happens, if there's a claim and they need to contact us to be able to find out who to call or if they have a question, or sometimes even maybe they need help or support, right? I think one of the conversations you and I got into when we were doing a pre-call was the fact that Snellings Walters will actually review some of your contracts um, to help you understand risk. And so if you have an agreement with a client and you want to make sure before that agreement gets signed that you're not carrying too much risk, that's a role that you guys play and a value add that you add to that relationship, right? And so if you kind of roll that right into this whole AI conversation, it seems like you could totally see where an AI agent is going to come to these insurance brokers as a way of really being able to service these clients so that they can get what they need, right? Because insurance brokerages tend to be very high or very heavy in customer service, right? Because people need, reprints of insurance cards, or maybe they have questions about policies that they have, or maybe they don't remember when their renewals are or their payment plans or all of these different things that happen. That it seems like it would not only be great for you guys as a broker, but as a consumer, to have an interface where I could go in and
Yeah.
ask these kinds of questions and get immediate feedback, whether it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 2 o'clock in the morning, would be really of great benefit to me, right?
Yeah.
And I think that many of our businesses all have a customer service component to it.
Yes.
And I think that this is why, as an industry, you'll often hear what they either refer to as it's the year of the agent, or sometimes you'll hear people refer to this as agentic AI. And agentic AI means it's driven by an agent, right?
Yeah.
And it's somebody that does this work for you to be able to service your clients or customers, in a way that's maybe either better, faster, or extend your business hours in a way that you can't do today.
You make a really good point. In fact, two areas that agencies, in retail insurance agencies run in are contract review and certificates of insurance or proofs of insurance. Carriers do not run in those areas. So they can be helpful. They can say this contract's unacceptable or we don't like the terms, but they're going to ask my client to go see his lawyer. Well, we're in the business where we're trying to quickly analyze, hey, the limits we have on our policy are not high enough to what your landlord's requiring or your general contractor, wherever you're working for, whatever the contract requirement is. So a need for us is how do we, because training people to read contracts, legalese is, it's like another language.
Sure.
So what we
Not
need,
even a very standard
well,
language.
and what we need is there's just two sections of a contract that we try to focus on. It's insurance and indemnity. And there's terms in there. Well, what we love about AI is it simplifies that process. And what we can't get from a carrier is you're expanding your operation and you're opening an office down in Texas. Well, the language in Texas by their courses is quite different than Georgia. So we're looking for efficiencies on how we as a firm can be better in this arena and it's not coming from the carriers. That's something we have to be good
Mhm.
at. And we're trying to separate ourselves, not just separate, a lot of good agencies do this. So sometimes it's a separation of us and other agencies, but oftentimes is us trying to find efficiency because of the time consumption that's required for us to serve our clients. And that's an area that I see AI really running in soon. It's already probably occurring where we're going to have a better turnaround time on that analyzation on contracts, especially if it's multi-state, where we can have that turn and it's easier for us to train in-house.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, right? And so, if you were looked at 2025 on into 2026, um, what do you think are areas that you guys could see really using AI? And I'll give you a little bit of a shout out here. One of the things that Snellings Walters has done a tremendous job of is you guys are a very forward thinking company in terms of your technology, right? And so, when we met you, gosh, years ago, one of the things that you guys were trying to embrace even back then was how do we allow our customers to commute or to be able to work from home? And this wasn't pandemic related, right? This was before that, right? And so you guys were already well set. And so, you guys were looking at phone systems, you were looking at cloud, you were looking at hosted desktops, right? To be able to provide that same experience. And so, you guys have done a tremendous job, even of just being where you are today. I would say you're further ahead than most, even just with where you are, right? But looking and now thinking about AI and having conversations like this, I think we're kind of now looking at what's going to be that next
Yeah.
thing, right? In 2025, 2026, maybe even 2027.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. You played a large role in that. We didn't know when we put in our Zoom rooms that we were going to need them for a pandemic. We just didn't know. You were helpful, and we were asking, how do we do this? How do we have meetings? And what drove this a lot for us is we were trying to figure out how to bring more aligned clients to our office because we tended to find the better client when we could go after that, when we could have them at our office. And then we found in time someone couldn't come, so we needed a way to communicate. And so we were using more of the technology that you helped implement so that we could actually have Zoom calls with
Mhm.
multiple people, especially some of our staff that work out of state. So it became a need, and then lo and behold, it became front and center with the pandemic because that's how we did everything. And so it was great. Recently, you and I had a discussion, and we were talking about what the future looked like, and you made this comment about how voice. We're going to be using a lot more voice, a whole lot less typing. Well, what's interesting is if you look at our industry now, and I'm sure your business, your staff is typing a lot of emails. We're getting crushed. If it's not on a keyboard, it's on our phones. And to think that maybe we could be freed up to just have a conversation like this and to keep moving. I think about the time in the car that I was spending on a phone, which is my preference in communication, but there's got to be a way to capture that so that you can you not only have a documentation for it, which our industry requires, but also reminders of follow-ups and such. And so I'm excited about where we're going. I also am a little overwhelmed, but I have to remind myself that 5 years ago, when we were talking with clients about cyber insurance, I remember my client saying, "Oh, I have a great virus, antivirus. I don't need cyber coverage." And
Mhm.
I remembered thinking, "Wow, we got a lot of education to do." And now we're way past that. We're into, how to better operate your business, and then changing and putting in a lot of technology that you hadn't had before because you have to get
Yeah.
the insurance policy.
I'm curious, as I hear you talk, in your opinion, do you think that cyber insurance has forced companies to run a better business?
Without a doubt. Reluctantly. It's like everything that's new. And I get amazed. We've had our share of controversies. Y2K, that was,
Mm.
and I wondered if cyber was a little bit like that, a manufactured problem that somebody had a silver bullet for or a program. Only to learn that now, where we thought our inbox was safe, we all know it isn't, and we're worried about our parents who really didn't grow up with the technology. We're trying to
Sure.
tell my mother's been a victim of crime, and I'm just like, don't open your email. so, um, so yeah, I see that problem, and to some degree, I would have to admit that even in our business, we've been dictated to on how we have to operate. We didn't want to because we didn't have the time for it, and because of so much we have going on around us. But we have to take the time. You have to anticipate that now. And I mean, maybe you could comment more on this. I just feel like the world's moving so much, it's coming so much quicker than it's ever been.
Yeah.
And I feel like I have to stay on the edge, not only to find a competitive advantage, but just so I can be prepared and kind of schedule what we have to do that I don't even know we need to do.
I don't disagree. When you look at technology and really when you think about AI as it's coming to us, right? You can see this thing in the future and it's day by day, every time you wake up, you see it taking one step further, right? Um, can you see AI as being a real differentiator in the market space in terms of those companies that are starting to for lack of a better word, dabble in
Yeah.
how can they embrace that technology versus what I almost see on the other side is those companies that are taking the stance of let's let everyone else figure it out. And once someone else has figured it out and they can just sell me a subscription, then we'll just buy a subscription. Do you see a real
Yeah.
difference there?
So we actually had this past week. One of our carriers was unwilling. We download a lot of data from our carriers so that we can give that to our clients. A lot very efficient. That's not a surprise. Everybody has that. However, one of our recent requests was to get new data, more targeted data from our carrier. And one of our carriers had no problem with that because it was coming into our server, and another carrier said, sorry, we're only going to send it if it goes to a real person at a real email address. And the problem with that is we aren't about to empower that person to have that data.
Sure.
So we're limited. So that carrier, I thought to myself, that policy and procedure was put in place probably for good security reasons. but they're going to get left if they because other carriers have already graduated to a better level and they're more helpful to us. Now, our job is to be objective and find the best price and coverage, but it's hard when one carrier is giving you data late because they don't have the technology. And we're seeing that even now. But you think about it, I feel nimble and quick at our size firm. I I worry about some of the carriers I have who are so large and have such antiquated systems. It's like steering a large ship
Hmm.
to put in all these changes when they don't have controls in place or people that understand it. So I feel like that gives us an advantage, but also we can't wait on the carrier to get that. We have to be moving ourselves because we've got to demand efficiency and budget for efficiency.
It's a really interesting dynamic, right? Because on one hand, as an insurance company, um, you have to be of a certain size that you have enough bandwidth to be looking at these new technologies, to be thinking about the future, right? And how you're going to take advantage. On the other hand, if you were too big, somehow you lose focus because the size of that company really stifles that innovation. And so it's almost like those medium-sized companies, those that are too small, those that are too big, are really the companies that are best poised to have enough resources to really think about how to move the needle and how to become a much more mature company,
Yeah.
right? Whereas, these smaller companies, they're just struggling to keep up. And these larger companies, it just takes so long to get anything done that quite frankly, they're struggling to keep up, right? And so that middle player is really a great space to really be in, right?
Well, if you're not staying ahead of things, then your IT department or consultant will be running your company because you won't know what to do and they do know what to do or what they have to do. And that's not where you want to be. That's too late. And I see this. I mean, you think about it. We have new positions created in large entities because they have a problem and they're trying to push all these problems into that department because it's their new problems.
Yeah.
And so I've been amazed at new startup companies who actually have positions for IT that and they could be in a manufacturing job, but they actually have an IT department that they would have never had 5 years ago. And that's just an example of the need for AI and the need for constant education on what's coming our way.
Yeah. Do you guys feel that it's Snellings Walters? Sorry to kind of call you out directly, but do you feel like it's Snellings Walters, the technology in your marketplace is really giving you guys a leg up?
Yes, I remember the days when we were 17 employees and we would hire somebody, and Clay Snellings, a good friend and partner, would run to Dell and buy a computer just to hopefully have it set up by the time they showed up the next morning. And we all played a role in being the IT person.
Mm.
And so what I didn't like is they'd show up and sometimes it's embarrassing we had employees using an old keyboard and an old mouse because we were moving and growing too quick.
Yeah.
We weren't anticipating our need. So we've learned the hard way, which is how not to do it. We've gotten far enough ahead now where we anticipate what we're going to have and we have that stuff set up, of course, but it's so much more in depth now. It's a training. And there's meetings and, I didn't know in 2007 when I started Snellings Walters that we would be having the number of meetings we have. But I can't imagine running our business without the meetings, without the constant update and education and research
Yeah.
that's required because that's what makes the job easier.
And I feel like with Snellings, um, there's really two parts to this successful, right? I think one part is the technology component to it, right? And I think it's a fair statement to say that a lot of our companies, and it doesn't even matter what you do, we are all technology companies. We're all customer service driven companies.
That's right.
And it doesn't, again, really matter what it is that you do. But I think the other thing, and we're going to do a whole series on this. We haven't even kicked it off yet, but watch out for it. But we're going to do a whole series on a business framework called EOS or entrepreneurial operating system,
Mm.
right? And I bring that up simply to say, I know that you guys are also an EOS company.
Yes.
And that's really interesting to me because, you know, you take that sort of material that you had where you guys have built the company to this certain level of expertise, and then you layer onto that all of this IT and technology to give you a competitive advantage, right? There's people like you who I sort of feel like are standing at the crow's nest on the ship with your periscope looking out into the future saying, where do I think our industry is going? How do I really make sure that our customers are going to be best served? And by the way, we can service them better than anyone else because we've got a guy like Steve looking at what's not here yet. And we will be there before that wave comes, right? So I think you take all of that and then you layer on that last piece, which is, oh, and by the way, we do all of this complicated stuff using a formal framework like EOS as a way to really drive value. And I don't know if you wanted to comment on this at all,
Yeah.
but it feels like you guys had really got a competitive advantage in some of the tool sets and things that you guys are doing, not only when it comes to technology, but AI and EOS and this sort of this whole package, right?
Yeah. Well, for those of you out there that are using entrepreneurial operating system, or traction is also that's called, that you're capturing issues. What I think is interesting is so many of our issues can be tech related and visionary related, where we're not really seeing what's coming. And for a while, we had really good vision, but at the same time, that ends. It's a constant process. And so, analyzing what your issues and threats are to your business and then forming a game plan, that's what I like about this philosophy, which is available to everybody. I do recommend training on it because you're going to have a hard time following it. You're going to have a hard time getting everybody to follow it. Back to you, business owners, we're usually the hardest ones because we got a mindset of what we want to do and what we don't want to do. But we have to do those things we don't want to do. And I feel like traction is a really good for this subject because it forces you to think and consider things, and then you get with other business owners and if you're not in that type of group, I would recommend that. And I think Traction or Entrepreneurial Operating System offers those types of interactions with other business owners. So you can kind of compare notes. And I think that's been profound for us. I would love to take more credit for what we've done, but I think a lot of what we've done is listen to other people that had problems that were larger than us and told us, you better watch out for this. And we listened and we moved on that. So a lot of our learning, so to speak, was stolen data from people that were just like, "Hey, you need to do this,"
Right.
and that some of that comes from you. You've been a great partner at pointing out things that we had to consider that we really didn't want to consider, but we're thankful now that we did, and that's an ongoing process. Isn't
Yeah, it really is. Well, I appreciate that. As you guys are thinking about this early adoption for AI, and you kind of wrap this all up and put it together in a bow, um, I'd love to know from your perspective as a business owner, as you guys are walking this path, just like honestly the rest of us, MIS too,
it?
right? Um, what advice would you give someone who was looking at AI and trying to figure out how to reap some of the benefits that you are looking to see? Kind of give us that, from the crow's nest. Here's what I see.
Yeah. Well, it's maybe a bad analogy, but I'm an old school guy. I used to keep prospects and clients in a Rolodex, basically, where I could see it, physically touch it, and I had data written down that I felt that I needed. Well, that's not enough. And what I love about AI is that it gives you a lot more data and it gives you better actions. And so instead of just maybe you have a planning day, a Friday. That's what I used to do in my when I was growing up. And now it's daily. So I have a process now that is much more intense, and it's a lot better data. And I'm not using the old systems. I'm actually finding efficiency. So for about every dollar now that I could spend in technology, I could be saving, 2 to $5 because I'm finding efficiencies. That means I'm doing the process better, sometimes with less people, sometimes with less time. But I think time's our greatest enemy, not necessarily overhead. But we also remember we're growing, so we're trying to keep the people we have healthy. We want a healthy culture, which often gets left by the wayside when you're in a business and you're under the pressures of an owner of having a profitable business. So you got to have a healthy culture because you will lose your clients if you don't. You lose your
Yeah.
staff first, and then you lose your clients. And so I think there's a lot of reasons why we have to be on this edge and why we have to investigate. And one is because we want to serve better, and two is we want to have a a office culture that attracts and retains the best talent. And I think we're doing that. I don't, this is a challenge to stay there. I think we've had some success here recently, but it's a constant challenge to stay on that edge.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And so I want to finish with this thought because we often get asked, honestly, because we're IT people, how are we using AI? How are we looking at using AI? How do we think AI is going to impact our business, right? And I feel like this is a fair question for everybody who owns a business, no matter who you are, right? And so I am going to answer that because I know everybody is really curious to know. And I can tell you one of the platforms that we are actually just about to come out with, we've been working on it, gosh, for the last couple of years since we had this whole tech exchange conversation.
Mhm.
And one of the things that we did is we went and we looked at all the data that we had around our service tickets. Why do people call us? And we took that data and we split it up into really two categories. What requires situational awareness, right? And again, that's for this user, for this company, for this one time, you need to apply some discretion to do this one thing, right? Those are really hard. And then we looked at the structural awareness, right? Like reset your password. How you reset your password is the same every single time, right? So there are things that are always very structurally aware. And so we took a look at all of our data in our ticketing system and we analyzed that data and we broke it out into what was structurally aware and what was not, what was situationally aware. And one of the insights that we walked away with is that 48% of all of our inbound service tickets were actually structurally aware.
Hmm.
And so we then sat and we said, let's put these things into categories. And we came up with 38 items that people call us for regularly that we could use AI to help automate, right? I forgot my password. I'm getting a piece of spam. Add me to this distribution list. Take me away from this distribution list. Add a new employee. Take away an employee, right?
Mm.
These are all very structurally aware tasks. And if we kind of go to this whole concept that we were talking about a minute ago, where we're all in customer service. And from an IT perspective, we're trying to figure out how do we service our customers bigger, better, faster, right? Because it makes happier customers. And so we have been, spending the last couple of years really developing some technology that will allow um, our people to be able to pick a customer, pick a task, and hit execute, and that AI agent will go and execute that task, make notes as to what it's done, update the documentation, add notes into the service ticket,
Hmm.
and then close the service ticket all within 1 or 2 seconds, which I think is a huge, customer service gain for somebody who's calling in and they're wanting one of these 37 items, right?
Hmm.
And so, as an IT company, we kind of ate our own dog food, so to speak, right? Where we said, hey, let's think about what we say in 2023. What problems, did we have that we would like to make better? And just like you, we're trying to figure out, what are those strategic things that we can do to be better than our competitors? How can we leverage that technology? And so, I just kind of wanted to throw that out there so that you guys have a sense of, what is MIS doing and how are we embracing this in our business as well.
Liam, tell me a little bit more about some AI opportunities you see with an insurance agency like us.
I think it kind of goes back to that thought that at the end of the day, you guys are a customer service industry,
Yeah.
right? And so you're trying to produce not only a good quality, but a great quality, right? An experience that is so far superior to what anyone else is doing it. You're really taking that customer journey, right? And I know one of the things that we started doing is we take all of our calls that come in off of our support desk, we translate them to text. Um, Nothing particularly special there. But then what we're doing is we're using open AI to go and read those calls, look for certain keywords, and come back with a score as to what was our customer service level, what we call a sentiment
Mhm.
on that ticket. And if we see that there was a ticket that maybe it didn't go as well as what we'd want, we're notifying our service manager. And so if you really think about what's happening, that means that we are listening to and reviewing every single call.
Mhm.
I think that that's another great use of AI. And, if I think about Snellings Walters, you guys have a distributed staff that are taking, I don't know how many, but a lot of phone calls on a daily basis.
Yeah.
There's a lot of data there, right? And I think if you think of that example about how we're using AI to create that structural awareness, I think it would be really interesting if you could take all of those call recordings and begin to understand, why are your customers calling?
Yeah.
Do you also have a set of tasks that are structurally aware
Yeah.
that you could build technology around to create a better customer experience? I think that there's a story that not only for you, but I think that there's a story there for all of us
Yeah.
in our businesses.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. It would be interesting to run kind of a research project on why people are calling and what are they calling about, because we can find efficiency there and empower our staff to handle that quicker. Then we're freed up to do things that are more profitable.
Right. And I think that's kind of the name of the game, right? It's about the maturity level, right? It's
Mhm.
how are you pushing that ball uphill so that you are really providing an experience that is phenomenal to your customers, right? And an insurance company said to you one time, there's really two interactions that a client has with their insurance company that makes it or breaks it. And that is, it's the underwriting process and it's the claims process, right? If you really truly want to know if you have the right insurance, file a claim, right?
That's
Because
right.
that's when you'll get to really see, is everything you bought going to stand up to the thing that just happened?
Mhm.
And I think that that's really true, right?
Yeah, well said.
Awesome. Well, Steve, I really appreciate you joining us today and sharing your insights. I think you guys run an amazing company, and we certainly appreciate your partnership.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. Thank you, guys.